Yeah.
Have a good one. We'll see you Sunday.
Okay.
We expect God to appear in power, in grandeur. That's how we expect God to be. The wind, the earthquake, the fire, they made sense to Elijah. That made sense that that's where God was. But God appears as a quiet whisper. The first three things just announced his coming. But his coming wasn't what they expected, what Elijah expected when he actually showed up. And I mean, that story, I think, is in the Bible to teach us that lesson. Sometimes, if you're not really quiet, you'll miss God in action. If you're not paying attention, you'll miss God. Because he doesn't always appear in the big and the grandiose. He sometimes appears in the quietness of a still small place. So, that's a really good one.
It's very similar. I heard this thing. It's like, people ask God for a sign all the time.
Yeah.
But they're looking for a big oak tree when they ask for one. What they don't realize is God may be having an acorn.
That's exactly right. That's a great illustration. God may not be the oak tree, he may be the acorn. That's exactly right. That's a great way of putting it. And that is so human of us. We want to see God in the grandiose. We really do. Sometimes he shows himself that way. We know that. Okay, God did things in the Old Testament that were pretty grandiose. I mean, that's obvious. But then Elijah just experienced one with fire coming down from heaven and consuming the sacrifice. That was a big moment. But it's not always that way. And if you only look from God in the big, you'll miss God a lot. So, okay. Punishment that was prophesied. Listen to what Ezekiel says. Ezekiel is warning the children of Israel. In my zeal and fiery wrath, this is actually God speaking through Ezekiel, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. Now, that's a significant, widespread earthquake. What?
A lot of quaking involved.
That's a lot of quaking involved. That's exactly right. A lot of people associate that passage with several of the earthquakes in Revelation that we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay? Now, I don't know whether they're tied together or not, but a lot of people feel like Ezekiel's prophecy is an end times thing. That it really applies more to the end times. And we know that's the case because there's 5 earthquakes mentioned in Revelation that we're going to talk about here just in a second. But certainly God uses earthquakes as part of his punishment. That's clear from that. Okay. To aid Israel in battle. This is a cool story. In 1 Samuel 14, Israel is fighting the Philistines, a superior force. Then panic struck the whole army. That's the Philistine army. Those in the camp and the field, those in the outposts and the raiding parties. And the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. So God used an earthquake to scare the Philistines, and Israel went out and wiped them out. Because they were all panicked about the earthquake. God had warned them it was coming. Okay? How many of you know that there was a significant earthquake when Jesus died? This is really important. Matthew chapter 27, verses 50 to 54. Listen to this. And when Jesus had cried it out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, let's talk about that for a second. This is one of the notable events around Holy Week. Okay? This one is very hard to explain away if you're a skeptic or a critic. All right? The temple curtain separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. Okay? Only the high priest could go behind that curtain once a year to offer sacrifices for the people. It was the most sacred spot on the planet for Jewish people. Okay? The Jews believed that God's presence resided in the Holy of Holies. Right? The curtain, it is said, was was 40 feet high and as thick as a man's hand. Now, I challenge you, go home and find a pair of everyday old blue jeans and just try to rip them with your hands. It can, but it takes a lot of effort. Okay? It's a tough task. Now, can you imagine putting pair after pair after pair after pair of blue jeans in a stack until they were that thick, tightly woven? Rip that sucker in half. Okay? Right. That's right. Yeah. That's the only way. Yeah. But notice the scripture says the temple, the curtain of the temple was torn, not cut, torn in two from the top to the bottom. So in this 40-foot high curtain, that thick, literally is torn in half. Now, whether or not God physically did it or whether he used the power of the earthquake to do it really isn't significant, which one it was. It's just, that's an incredible event. And basically, why it's important is, it was in that moment that basically we were given access directly to God. We didn't have to go through a priest anymore. The priest didn't have to make atonement. We had direct access to God. That was the symbolism. So the temple curtain is torn. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. Now this is a passage we don't talk about very often, but I love this story. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tomb after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Now that was a future thing. There he talks about it happened 3 days later. But when the centurion and those who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Now, let's go back to this, okay? They came out of the tomb after the resurrection. When Jesus rose, the earthquake opened up the tombs. It says that. 2 days, 3 days later, all these people who had been dead came out and started walking around the city talking about Jesus. Now, that's the whole story. That's all the Bible gives us. What happened to those people?
Did they die in the end?
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
They came back to life and they died like a normal person later.
Okay, and that's what a lot of people think, and that makes sense to me. Another theory is that they appeared for just a little bit and then they all just disappeared again and were gone.
If they had walked through a wall, that's a different story.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, and that's what some people believe, that they sort of had bodies like Jesus did after the resurrection, who kind of came and went, you know. But I find that very interesting. That's one of those questions that you want to ask, like, why didn't you give us some more information? Why didn't you tell me the rest of that story? I mean, we needed Paul Harvey to tell us the rest of the story. I want to know what happened to those folks. But I agree with you. I think they went on to live for a while, and then they all eventually died again.
What did they look like when they were raised?
Yeah, well, obviously, I suspect people knew they weren't. It doesn't say there was panic in the street, you know, ghosts running around. I mean, yeah, we don't know. It's just one of those little tidbits that the Bible gives us, and I've said this over and over and over again. I think the Bible gives us these tidbits to get us to ask questions and think, you know, and start to sort through why things are what they are.
When you get there, you'll know the answer.
That's exactly right. Someday in heaven, the answers will all be revealed. You're exactly right. But notice what happens. I mean, the earthquake at Jesus' death was significant. The temple curtain was torn in half. The rocks split apart. Tombs were broke open, and basically tombs were caves, mostly. Not too many people buried in the ground. All these people show up a couple days later. The centurion realizes he has seen something unique. Surely this man was the Son of God. I mean, it was a powerful moment for this Roman soldier. I think that was his conversion moment. Yeah, oh yeah, right, exactly. So then 3 days later, notice again, Matthew 28, there was a violent earthquake, for the angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. questions I've heard over and over again is, how this, remember the ladies, as they were on their way to the tubes, said, who's gonna roll away the stuff? How are we gonna move it? It was huge. Well, the Bible tells us how it moved. There was an earthquake. It just rolled away. Okay? The angel's appearance created the earthquake. I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. Okay? So, there's an earthquake when Jesus dies. There's an earthquake when he rises from the grave. That's accompanying major events, major announcements. Okay? Later on, Paul and Silas is released from prison in Acts chapter 16. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, which is a very unique story in and of itself. They're in prison, they've been beaten up, they're in a dark, ugly prison, and prisons were not nice places, okay? And what are they doing? At midnight, they're singing and praying, okay? I mean, that's pretty cool, okay? They were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them, okay? Our behavior impacts others. Suddenly, there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And once all the prison doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. Now, that's a miracle, not just an earthquake, by the way. Because the earthquake would shake a lot of stuff. It probably wouldn't release all the chains. But God saw to it that that happened as well. Right? And if you remember that story, the jailer, he said, man, I'm going to kill myself because they're going to kill me because all these people are going to escape. Paul said, no, we're all here. It's cool. Okay? So God used an earthquake to free Paul and Silas.
In that same story, you can also say that he also used that moment as a way to show his mercy.
Oh, absolutely.
People have, because Paul was like, we're not
Yeah.
going to hurt.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. But Paul and Silas showed a very forgiving attitude toward their persecutors. Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff in that story. Earthquakes have been a part of life on earth for all of mankind's history. Earthquakes have just been part of what we are. Okay. I found this interesting. Based on data from the past 26 years on our earthquake archive back to 1900, there are about 480,000 earthquakes on average every year around the world. 500,000, roughly. Now, I would have never thought that, okay? Start doing some research, you get all kinds of interesting stuff. All right. Magnitude of 8 or higher. Only less than 1 per year. 0.84. Magnitude 8 earthquake will destroy hundreds of square miles.
In Alaska, years ago, was that 8 or 9?
Yeah, well, yeah. There have been several, but they're fairly rare, as you can see. Okay. Magnitude of 8 is pretty significant. The San Francisco earthquake, which most of us remember, I think they said about 7.5, something like that. The first San Francisco earthquake was probably a little worse, but the Richter scale hadn't been developed yet, so we don't know for sure what that one was. Magnitude 7 or higher, about 15 quakes every year around the world. 6 or higher,